philosophy. Claiborne and me, COP. You, me, and Claiborne, coffee and philosophy.
I don't know. What do you think? 2 more times? Yeah. Hola, como esta? Konnichiwa, things of that nature. I don't know what's going on with you over there, Cope. You guys still on fire, or did the floods put it all out?
Yeah, dingo babies, shrimp on a barbie, crack a BB, get a pack of weenies, all that kind of stuff. But the saga continues here down under. The fires are still going in selected areas, that kind of thing. But as I mentioned before, we're basically the Armageddon that's happening here in Australia, Hades, if you will. Hell on Earth continues because, as I mentioned, we had the drought, and that's put the whole platypus situation on extinct mode. Going along with that, then of course we had the fires, and of course we had the rains that helped the fires a little bit, but we ended up having some mudslides and landslides, and a whole bunch of trees and stuff were getting washed away because the leftover breeze from the fire. And continuing on from there, I think that's where we left off last week on the episode of What the Fuck is Happening in Australia. But just to continue that, I'm going to check a little something here in the chat space. We managed to get ourselves a crap ton of hail in selected areas of Australia as well, which did a crap ton of damage to vehicles and houses and smashing windows because we needed a little bit more chaos in the world.
Well, and, you know what? Like that actually makes sense though, right? Like if the fires don't want to go out, just fucking beat the shit out of them with big fucking rocks of hail.
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't in the correct areas because the areas that didn't need hail or rain is what copped it. It works in mysterious ways. And then, of course, after that, we had ourselves some dust storms that came on through, and I made the mistake of leaving my window open a crack, and went to sleep. I woke up and I was covered in ash and red crap. That was fantastic. So this is what's happening in Australia right now. We are burning in hell. Thanks for coming.
You really are living in Thunderdome, it would appear. But yeah, man. I don't know, man. I'm hoping things get better sooner than later over there, obviously. But I'm not much on following the mainstream news, but I keep seeing, just like basically it looks like the fog of war is like rolling out over the whole continent, and it's wild, man. But yeah, just try to stay safe and yeah, you said the magical P word, man. I mean, I feel like we could probably do like a whole show just about like what the fuck is a platypus. But no, I don't know. I mean, I was kind of thinking. I know we wanted to get like a little bit more, like maybe finish up the topic last week about like the idea of emotional manipulation tied in with like basically the difference between like actual suicidal tendencies and people like weaponizing it as like a means of control. And I think we've talked about it before. Like we have talked about The Good Place before, right? Like that show.
Yeah, we've discussed that.
So like I was watching it this week, and I think they still have like 2 more episodes before the series finale, but like this one was like a really good one. The one that came on this week, I watched it earlier today, and it kind of like gets into almost like a little bit, I guess you could say, like in some ways, like the nihilistic view of the universe, and it's kind of like put some thoughts into my mind for later. But I don't know, man. Unless you fished up any new topics, or if any of these fine folk wanna like bombard us with their suggestions. But that's about the only things that I really had bouncing around in my pinball machine up there today.
Yeah, all good. I'm down to explore wherever the hell we go. The only thing I had in addition to like that little update was something that you mentioned the other day when it came to donations and that kind of thing, which struck me as interesting, has played out in Australia, fires and all that kind of thing. Chuck some of the imagery in there in regards to the money that's being donated and how much of it is actually getting to the people. I mean, there are people that I interact with that have been affected by the fires and that kind of thing. And as much as the cash has been rolling in as far as donations go from all around the world, and kudos to everyone who put in an effort there. But you're getting it to the actual people is an interesting situation because, as the image there shows, 95 mil raised, 30 mil actually goes out to individuals, et cetera, as we roll down through the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and Vinnies. I just thought that was interesting that you called that a while before it happened, and there was a reflection on what happened, the disaster that happened in your area, and it's a bit of a cut and paste situation.
Yeah, no, man, it's something that like I had to see firsthand here, and it's really fucking disheartening, and it's I don't want to sound like a grumpy asshole here, but like there's a very good reason why I stopped donating to most charities. Because just like what you're seeing right there, like so much of this is just a fucking money making scam, and it's really fucking sad that is like literally the current state of our society, right? Like bad shit happens, people want to do something to help, like that's a good sign, right? Like there are good people out there that are like, even if I can't like go fly down to Australia, I would like to send in some money, help out, etc. And like I think last week I dropped in one of the things that was doing a fundraiser that like I actually, like on some level trust them. But yeah, like from the things that have happened here, like after Hurricane Katrina, and Hurricane Katrina, it was like on both sides, right? Like we had not only the money coming in that wasn't getting sent to where it was supposed to be, it was getting misappropriated and all that crap. But then you also had people that were like trying to scam the government to try to like, act like they had more damage than they did, etc., trying to get checks. And it's like, what ultimately happens is so much of the stuff that actually needs to go towards reparations and fixing people that have just like had their whole life wiped out, actually just goes to greedy motherfuckers that are trying to profit off of this whole thing. And, like again, whenever we had the floods here, where like most of the whole state went underwater, we had like all these celebrities, like there are a couple of celebrities that actually live in New Orleans, and John Goodman, that's one of them. He has like a house down there, and he like spends a lot of time in NOLA, and then you've got like I think Taylor Swift and some other people who are donating like millions. But yeah, again, it's like the same thing, man. Like you can see all the millions coming in, and just like what you're showing right there, you can see what actually gets, put to good use. Now, think about it, $95 million raised. And they're like, okay, well, we'll put a third of it where it's supposed to be. Who's that other $65 million going to, Like, it's pretty fucking absurd, right? Like, literally, the rich-ass politicians and people that are getting this money and getting control of it are literally just lining their pockets. And that's not even touching on the people that are doing, like, the fake GoFundMes and all that bullshit. It's very disheartening, man. And, like, I don't, like, say this stuff to, like, tell people you shouldn't try to help, you shouldn't care, et cetera, et cetera. But like, just, you gotta really vet where you put your money at in situations like this. If you are sending money as, like, a financial means to help, just really vet whoever you're giving it to, man, because there's a lot of untrustworthy / unscrupulous motherfuckers out there, dude.
Yeah, definitely. And like what you're saying there, it comes down to, the good old machine doing what the machine does best, and that is lining its own pocket. You start looking at, the CEOs of these charities and that kind of thing, and they're pocketing so much money. It's funny. And as far as, like, where the funds are going, there's a lot of shit up in the air at the moment, because when this came out, people were disgusted, they were outraged and that kind of thing. And now, of course, they've pledged to double what they're putting out there. It's like, okay, well, you could have done double from the start, but okay, now that you're in trouble, you've been caught, now you're going to do that. But their excuse was, what we're doing here is we're saving the money for future, disasters that may happen. It's like, really? That's you're going to save money,
Dude,
right,
right there.
for the next
Bullshit.
tragedy.
Bullshit. Where was the money you saved from the last tragedy then? Bullshit.
Exactly. But it's all smoke and mirrors, and this is going back to the human condition. Drink. This is what we do, and unfortunately, some of the things we were saying last week and the week before in regards to these kinds of things with the donations and everything. I know some of the friends that I was talking to in regards to this, they were kind of like, "Oh, how dare you?" kind of thing. That's a terrible thing to say, and I'm like, dude, like this is humanity. This is what happens. Like you're not going to play out this. And unfortunately, like I don't like to say that I'm right. Like I told you so, and that kind of thing. But like well, we told you so, and it's what's happened. And we have to kind of like recognize that. And there's better ways of doing these things. A lot of the people that have seen this have gone, okay, well, the best way to donate thing is either go face to face, and of course that's going to be difficult to walk up to a person and say, hey, here's some money, kind of. But what you can do is go out to the affected areas and spend your money in the affected area. So you buy local produce, you spend money, you buy things, you have lunch, you utilize their services, and that goes directly to business owners of the areas. And there's you kind of like impacting it a lot more than handing money to like the Red Cross, who's clearly going to keep like at least a third of it, or give a third of it and keep the rest. And this is the thing, we just have to think about what we're doing and not fall for the smoke and mirrors and the bullshit.
Yeah, sorry, I had to make a joke with done stuff there for a second, but yeah, man, it's one of those things, man. Like it is what it is, and I really like it's a hard thing to tackle, right? Because like if you tell people that it's all a fucking sham, what you're gonna do is get most people like just like, oh, okay, well I won't do anything then. And like that's not a solution either. So yeah, I'm totally with you about finding basically like better solutions, and that's why like if I ever like do anything with any charities, like I usually vet them pretty well. Like the company that I dropped last week is called Humble Bundle. So most of their charities are pretty good. Every now and then you get some that are may do some kind of questionable things, but like they do like Plus Water, Doctors Without Borders, etc. And I want to say they raised something like, oh God, I'd have to go look at their website. They raised several million for Australia whenever they did their bundle thing, if I remember correctly. And like they're a company that like literally what they do is they just sell video games and they do bundles like on older titles, things like that. Like they cut people deals, so like they're already saving people money. And whenever they did their Australia relief bundle, what they did was just go to, I guess, like a bunch of developers, ask them if they wanted to help out. Developers donated keys. They basically, they took on the traffic, handled the processing, etc. And they basically just collected money from people that were willing to donate, and in return they gave them some like older video games. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to profit off this, we're going to collect it. I guess the credit card companies will take their cut or whatever. And yeah, they'll send all the proceeds on to Australia. And it's interesting, man, because like I could even think back like a few years ago. People give Cards Against Humanity a lot of shit, right? But Cards Against Humanity actually like will do these things with their community where they'll like basically give people the option to vote with their money, right? They'll say like, okay, like if you do this, whatever, we can do X, and like sometimes it's for charity. One year, like just to prove a point on Black Friday, they decided they were gonna dig a Christmas hole and people could donate money, and the more money they got, they were gonna dig until the money ran out. No, like there was literally no point to this other than we're just gonna go dig a giant hole and people had the option to donate money to it, right? So people donated like all this fucking money, and they were just live streaming it for like weeks. They dug like the goddamn Marianas Trench somewhere out there, and then they turned around and just like put filled it back in, right? Because they didn't want to just like leave a giant gaping hole in the world. But yeah, man, like that should just tell you sometimes with like people's mindset, right? Like instead of just blowing money on Black Friday, some people were like, yeah, I get it, it's like a social statement, and here we'll just throw our money away in another way. And it's funny that, like, I think some people were literally just doing it for the memes, but I really think on some level, a lot of people got it, right? Like, they got the message. And, I mean, I feel like we need that wake up call with a lot of these charities, man. Like, if people really understood how many of these, like, giant, like, massive global charities, like Salvation Army, another bad one, in my opinion, is Goodwill. Yeah, that might trigger some people, but Goodwill is actually like I don't. Do you guys have Goodwill in Australia?
Well, we have the kind of like the message of goodwill. Essentially, if you say I'm giving things to Goodwill, it means you're giving it to charity. So like that is around, but we don't have like an actual like charity called, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so we have this massive fucking corporation here called Goodwill, and basically people can donate stuff, and they take all of this stuff and then they turn around and sell it, right? Now, the money basically goes to allegedly like rehabilitating people in the community. Like they hire a bunch of like felons, etc. And yeah, allegedly like all of this is supposed to be to like do good in your community. And like if you just look at like their numbers alone, like some real deep dive numbers on that mega corporation that is allegedly a charity that all these people like donate their stuff to, it's pretty fucking astounding, man. Yeah, and like see, Amber's right there. Like Goodwill is not a charity, but people have this mentality that it is, right? Like people think like, ooh, I'm gonna go donate this stuff to Goodwill. Well, there are like so many of these charities, right? Like they'll show you the oh God, I should almost have Ron come on and say what I'm about to say next because it's gonna get labeled badly. But like here we have this thing where they'll like show you all these videos of like the little kids in Africa with like the flies on their face and stuff, and they'll be like, oh, for 10 cents a day you could feed so and so and adopt this child. The thing is, man, like they take all these donations from people. Most of that money never actually gets to Africa to actually make any kind of change. And yeah, dude, it's astounding. Like all the money that we put into war in the U.S. alone, if we just stopped being fucking warmongers, we could literally solve world hunger. Like nobody would have to starve. We could put all of that money directly into feeding people, providing clean water. And I mean, we could honestly probably even shelter most people just from the U.S.'s fucking war budget. It's pretty insane, dude.
Yeah, look, something you said there in regards to the way that we sort of like perceive these air quotes charities, because they're not charities, they're business. Let's just be real, they're business. But it kind of like makes me think about how we kind of like we give blindly, and we kind of like feel better about doing so. Like I know there's a lot of people that say, for instance, will hand money over to whether it's a Red Cross or anything else, and they're like, yeah, I gave money to the fires, so I'm a good person, kind of thing. It's like one of those things that you do more for yourself than anyone else. And I'm not saying that everyone's like, but I'm saying that this may be part of like the illusion between what's actually happening, i.e., the corporations taking your money, giving a little bit to like whatever they need to actually make themselves be an air quotes charity, and keeping the rest to do whatever the hell they want to with. Yeah, that illusion between sort of like being a charitable joint and just another company taking people's money and being fools. But I think it's easier to sort of like blow smoke up people's asses than it is to face the truth and see that the reality is that this is what people tend to do, and that is take advantage of the situations. And yeah, exactly what you're saying there in regards to like the whole war machine and that kind of thing is like, yeah, like we spend so much money on stuff that is destructive, that hurts people more than it so like helps. And this kind of like even if we take all of the money that's been raised here for the fires and that kind of thing, or any other tragedy that's like struck anywhere around the world, it's kind of like a drop in the ocean compared to when we sort of like look at what we spend on destruction and chaos.
Yep, this is the current state of things, and yeah, I mean, again, like I'm not saying all of this stuff. Like I didn't jump into all of this just to like tell people don't try to do anything to help, don't donate, etc. I really just want to stress like if you're going to send money to like any of these kind of things, just do some research on them first, right? Like don't just feel like jump at the first person that's like, hey, give us some money, we're gonna help, so and so. Like it's just it is what it is, man. Like unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people out there that are looking to profit instead of help, and it's a damn shame. But yeah, I guess we've been kind of like into this topic for the last several weeks. I don't know you. I'm trying to remember where we left off exactly last week. I know we were kind of getting into the idea of like basically people weaponizing suicide, like
Yeah.
in relationships or, like for attention on social media, etc. And, I mean, I feel like we've done, several shows like getting into actual, like suicidal tendencies, like ways to, like help people, etc. I mean, I think it's only fair to like really address that issue as well because I honestly, like my personal opinion, I feel like you will not hear from and like not be like approached anywhere near as often by people that are legitimately suicidal as you will by people that will like just throw out that word for like shock value or as like some kind of like means to like grab your attention or try to like kind of manipulate you into doing something. I mean, would you say it's a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. And look, I know that we kind of like where we left off last week. Essentially, I was sort of like struggling with the fact of whether I was going to tell a story or not in regards to something that happened to me personally with this kind of thing. And you know, the more times that I've sort of like seen these things come forward is less in a sense of someone who is really suicidal and someone who claims to be suicidal for whether it's to gain particular attention from individuals or whether it's to manipulate somebody to do something that they want them to do. And that's kind of like the other side of it because there's the legitimate issue of people who are suicidal, and we have statistics on people who go through with this and succeed, and it's a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing. But there's also those that take advantage of this and utilize that for their own purpose, for their own gains, and that kind of thing. And as much as it sounds like we may be sort of like bordering on the line of being assholes for saying like, oh, people are just faking it. Some people do, very much like what we're talking about here with the fires and donations and that kind of thing, where there's tragedy, there's people that are willing to utilize that as a means to take advantage of other people for whatever reason that they want to. In the case of the fires and that kind of thing, it's for monetary gain. But there is also, the fact of being able to get people to do what you want them to do. And that in itself, just the power to be able to control people can be very tempting for people to play with. Because once they get a taste of it, that ability to go like, well, I can make people do things that I want them to do, and I don't have to do things, or I can, have people give me things or whatever it is that they're after. And that can be a very powerful thing once people actually get a taste of that in their lives. So, I think that's kind of like where we're headed towards here in this conversation. So not so much talking about people who are suicidal and have mental health issues, but people who take that construct and utilize it to their own advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's definitely about control, right? And I think that's part of the problem, right? Is people don't necessarily realize what they're doing, right? Like they're not fully aware of these things. Like whenever they use these tactics, I mean, I can tell you for the longest time, I wasn't even aware of the fact that I was doing manipulative shit, right? Like it's just I was raised into it, and I mean it was very firmly like ingrained into how I thought like we interacted with other people, and like, it took like a lot of actual internal, I had to go self-reflect. I had to like really think back through like moments in my life, like, okay, where did I learn this behavior, right? Because I think that's the thing. Like, it's not just becoming aware of it. Like, just becoming aware you're doing something doesn't necessarily fix it, right? Like, in my experience, you have to go back and find out, like, okay, well, where did this start? Like, why do I feel like this is a valid way to, like, interact with other people? Like, why do I think I should do this? Like, why are my expectations that people, react in a certain way? And why do I have, like, this series of, I guess you could say, like, tactics that I use to, like, basically escalate things until I get my way? And it's crazy because at first, like, I couldn't even see that I did it, right? But, like, once I became aware of the fact that, like, okay, this thing I'm doing, it's not healthy, right? Like, I should not be, like, treating my quote unquote friends like this, right? Like, I shouldn't be, like, trying to target other people and manipulate them. So, like once I could start to see, like, this is what I'm doing, then it's this whole process of, like, dissecting, I guess you could say, like, my mental processes and figure out, like, where did I learn this? Like, why did I learn this? How did I learn this, etc. And what I found personally is, like, going back, looking over my childhood. I mean, this is basically how I was, raised, right? Like, this is things that I was shown, like, you don't get your way, you can, like, silent treatment, you can get angry, you can do all these things. And, eventually just it escalated and there's more and more things. Like, what can I really say to grab somebody's attention and make them, conform or, like, bow to my will or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, we're definitely in agreement there. I think it's about control. But, like, you have to at least become aware of it, right? Because, like, if you can't realize that you're trying to control these situations and like, you're not going to be able to see, like, what you're doing to control it if you're not even aware that you're doing it in the first place, right? But yeah, it's something that I think the only way we can ever really solve is through, like, self-reflection, self-analysis, looking over our interactions with other people and figuring out, like, why are things going certain ways? Like, why do people react a certain way to me? And, like, why do I think, like, the best way to put this is, like, you can tell when, like, the energy of a conversation shifts, right? Like, when it goes from just being, like, friendly banter to, like, people, well, hopefully, if there's, like, actual active communication and you're paying attention to the other person, you can start to see, like, okay, well, I did something that's, kind of, like, making them react odd, right? So, like, the response shouldn't be to push it further to get what you want. Like, it's just it's interesting, right? Like, you have to be able to become aware of these things to ever change them. And
Yeah.
I think we can definitely agree on that part, at least.
Well, look, all human interaction is essentially social engineering. I mean, we all have different thoughts and feelings. There's a lot of subjective interaction, and what one person thinks is right may not be congruent with another person. But when we start looking at the psychological construct, what we tend to do, and this is true of, like, beings on different levels, whether it's human beings or whether it's monkeys, rats, pigeons, a whole bunch of different animals that we've tried to test on, that essentially what it comes down to is we do what works. And sometimes it's not even that we're taught. I mean, there's some in the chat space, a few people talking about, they learned this from their parents and they learned this from other people. But sometimes we just learn it on our own, and it's not through any other means besides the way that we interact with the world. So say, for instance, when we look at whether it's Pavlov's dogs, whether it's pigeons that have been trained to turn around in circles or play ping pong. Essentially what they've done is that they've been put in an environment that works in a particular way, and they get rewarded for doing particular things. So the bird itself doesn't know that the outcome of what it is that's happening. They just know that when they turn to the left, they get a pellet of food, and they're like, hey, that worked. If I move to the left, I get something cool. Awesome. I'm going to do more turning left until they do a full circle. When they get a full circle, then they get given multiple pellets. And they're like, okay, I need to turn in a full circle to get what I want. right? It's not even that you want it, it's just food. It's just nice to have this thing. So we get trained not only by those that we interact with, but also by our environment. And that can be, it's kind of like difficult to sort of go whether it's nature and nurture and that kind of thing. But essentially, we learn by doing. So going back to what I was saying before, essentially we do what works, and that can kind of like lean on things like morals and ethics. There's been multiple times when we've talked about different cultures, and we look at other cultures and go like, "Oh my god, how can they do that? That's barbaric. That's terrible." But that's essentially what's happened here is they've been in their environment, and whether it's through social constructs, whether it's the physical environment or anything else, it's shaped them into being that particular way. And we may think that it's wrong, but it's just how they dealt with their environment, much like ourselves in our own environment, go through the same thing, the same kind of like shaping and forming. But yeah, if we look at these things and go, okay, well, this is something that's happening, like acknowledging the fact that we're doing something that's whether it's detrimental to ourselves or others, acknowledging it is one thing, just like you're saying there. And whether we apply interventions or whether we think it's wrong, that comes down to our moral and our ethic. And that can be vastly different amongst different people, because some people think that, say, for instance, it's okay to kill animals and eat them, with the whole vegan situation. And in other people, so you can kill them, you can't kill them, that kind of thing. There's a discrepancy between the thought patterns, and being able to understand that and go, okay, well, some people are not going to think the same way that I do. That can be like a big step in itself, and understanding that people are going to be different, and if they're not like you, then you should leave them alone. It can be a difficult thing to do. So how do we apply these interventions, if we can't even acknowledge the fact that there's something wrong with what we're doing? I think is what you're asking, Clay.
Yeah, and honestly, it definitely takes like a major like shift in mindset to go from utilizing these kind of like tactics to stopping, right? I mean, the first thing, obviously, become aware of it. You can't do anything if you're not aware of it, right? But and I can tell you, I can actually remember exactly how I became aware of this, right? And it sucked. I was basically like very, very good friends with someone for years, and like all of these factors were in play. I think they were kind of like unhealthy habits on both sides. Like one thing is like I can realize we seek other people's validation, right? Like whenever we're not, like completely comfortable with ourselves and everything. And I think like that's the first thing is like realizing whenever somebody's like, okay, well I'm done with whatever this is, and like walks away, and you're very much left in that headspace of like, what the fuck, like like how dare you, right? But it's like having to like examine everything, like really like break down like what are my beliefs here, what do I think happened, what is actually happening, etc. And kind of like basically, like personally, I got stuck in a series of like deep ruminating thoughts for like months. You could probably call it a psychotic break. I don't know. It was bad, man. Like I couldn't sleep. I was just like constantly going over fucking events in my head. Like it doesn't make sense, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, like I started realizing, like, okay, well, what's missing here, right? Okay, like the person that I was like going to validate all of my thoughts, decisions, etc., is no longer there. So who's going to validate all of my thoughts and ideas and opinions, etc. And eventually I got to the point of well, I had to do that for myself, right? Like I can't depend on another person to always do this for me. Well, getting past that, I can start to examine other things and pick them apart and realize, like, okay, well, what was I doing? And, like, what, obviously this all kind of, like, starts from the what's the other person doing thing, because until you can see it in yourself, you're always looking for all this shit in other people. But yeah, like starting to like break down things and realizing that there was so much, like attention seeking slash validation seeking behavior, and then starting to get into the processes of how to get it, like the emotional manipulation that would come into play. Like obviously, if you send one of your friends a message, Cope, and it's like, yeah, life sucks, blah blah blah, and you're down in the dumps. You're looking for them to kind of just like pick you up, right? Because that's their job. They're your friend, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not their job, but that's something that you have to kind of like be able to get to eventually, right? Like you can't always just dump all of your shit on another person 24/7, right? Like it's not fair to either person involved, and if you're both doing it, it just becomes extremely codependent. It's not healthy. It's like not the foundation of any kind of like functional, balanced relationship at all. But really like kind of like breaking down into the tactics and starting to realize like whenever you like message people with like all your problems and stuff like that, like there's especially like in a codependent situation, like it kind of gets into like a almost like a one-upsmanship, like, oh, you think your day was bad, well here's how bad mine was, and it's basically just kind of turns into two people like wallowing in each other's fucking self-pity and validating it. But yeah, then we get into like the emotional manipulation. Okay, well, you know, whenever people like disagree with you, and then you start making the excuses of like, well, why it has to be this way, etc. And if they disagree, start getting sad or like not responding, etc. You go in for like those tactics to like make them basically change their opinion, and it's interesting because until you can see that you're doing these things, it's just the way you interact with other people, right? Like you don't really think about it; it's just the norm. But once you really start dissecting it, and you start to like understand why these things aren't like why you shouldn't approach things like this, then that's really when you can start to learn from it. But until then, you just keep doing it. And if you don't learn from this, you keep repeating the pattern or repeating the pattern. It's like, okay, well, this person's decided like I'm not going to put up with it anymore, so I'm going to go find somebody else to fill that validation seeking attention deficit that I need in my life, right? But ultimately, at least in my experience, what I came to is the fact that like I'm not paying attention to myself, right? Because I'm always looking for somebody else to validate all of my crap, and then getting past that point, I can start to see like, okay, well, we attract like things, so that's why people are always coming to me like this, and like my circle of friends was extremely small, but it was all very much people interacting on the same level, right? But getting past that and like starting to actually like work on myself and starting to change some of these things that I did to other people and like how I interacted with other people, it was it's interesting because you could just see like the change automatically, right? Like people that are on your basically like your frequency, on your wavelength, start coming into your life, and like over time it just keeps getting better and better and better. But one thing that I think you really have to learn too, especially whenever trying to like change in these situations, is you have to be willing and able to let go of the unhealthy relationships. And I think that's, to me, that was definitely probably the hardest part of all of this, right? Like accepting that I'm like approaching everything in my fucking life wrong, accepting that I'm the fucking bad guy sometimes. Like all of that to me was so much easier than learning how to let go, because it's kind of crazy. Like even whenever you can start becoming aware of all of this shit and you can start making these changes, like there's still like that, okay, well, I want to go show, I want to go tell, etc., like the people that are gone now. But that's the thing, like they're gone. You can't be dwelling on it, right? Like you gotta find some kind of like faith in the universe that if anybody's supposed to be meant to be in your life, they're gonna be there. Because if you're still like going around chasing fucking ghosts, then you're still seeking, validation outside of yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally with it, man. And the thing is, like, for a lot of people, they won't even see that in themselves, right? That they're engaging with this dynamic is probably the best way to put it, because it's an interactionary thing, right? And the acknowledgement of that is realistic what we need. If we want to apply interventions, if we want to make change, but like you're saying, they're holding on. Sometimes it causes more damage and hurts more than letting go. Image there in the chat to reflect that. But sometimes it takes a real smack in the face to do so, because something we've discussed in the show multiple times in the past is the fact that we can see this from the outside, but when we're in it ourselves, it's difficult. So we're watching somebody else go through this, a couple going through something, and we're like, dude, man, that dude's cheating and they're just falling for it. And, there's this and there's that. We can see it. But when we're in it ourselves, it's very difficult to see the forest through the trees, because like we're in it. And it's like, no, you don't understand. This is, different. Our love is true, and all these kinds of things. This bullshit, like a bit of awakening, the fog of war sets in. We get the blinders on, the rose-colored glasses, and we can't see beyond it. So being able to see outside of that can be very difficult when you're in the thick of it. And sometimes it takes a really hardcore thing to happen for you to get kind of like knocked out of that haze, the love bombing, and infatuation, I think, is probably the best way to put it, of the situation that you're in. Because for us, we are the center of our own universe. These things happen to us, and is the perspective that we take. But if we can step back from that and see it from an outsider's point of view, we'd see how, air quotes, wrong the situation is for us as an individual, and go, okay, well, this isn't for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. Look, when people are different from you, there's nothing wrong with it. It just means that they're different. So let's just say, for instance, you're in a relationship with the other person is cheating all the time, that kind of thing. That's just who they are. Maybe they should be in an open relationship. You don't want to be in an open relationship. Okay, so you shouldn't be with someone who wants to be in an open relationship. It's just that simple. But because of the time that you've committed to the situation, to the relationship, sunk cost fallacy, if you will, you're like, well, no, we're going to fight for this, and true love conquers all, and all this other bullshit that we've heard from TV and sitcoms and everything else enters our brains. And we just continue doing the same shit, expecting a different result. And it is absolute insanity. But what does it take to actually knock us out of that spell? Well, that'll come down to the individual and how much you're willing to take, because unfortunately what tends to happen in these kinds of situations is it starts off nice and light, but it gets more and more intense until something breaks. And the breaking point really depends on the person and where you draw your lines, like what is acceptable for an interaction with you. And regardless whether it's a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's family interaction, it doesn't matter what it is. You draw the lines, you define your life and what you accept and what you don't accept. And if people don't want to deal with that, too bad, right? Because it's your life. You get to choose what happens here. But we don't tend to see it that way. Like I said, the social constructs kind of like intervene, and we're like, oh no, we should, give them another chance, kind of thing. Well, no. Define your lines, draw the lines in the sand. And if others don't want to comply with it, well, that's fine. They're probably meant for another person, right? They're meant to be friends with other people. They're, a family member that you can keep your distance from. You can be respectful, but keep your distance from, because, they're toxic to you as an individual. You just don't mix it like oil and water, right? They have their own purposes. Oil has its own purpose. Water has its own purpose as well. They just don't mix, right? It's all good. But how do we see that? Well, that can be a bit difficult.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree about usually it reaches a breaking point, right? And this is totally where the letting go thing comes in, right? And this is usually where the extreme emotional manipulation starts coming in too, right? Because if you're not willing to let go, the other person's already reached that, like that breaking point, like they're trying to like walk away, cut ties, etc. And you start throwing out the, like, how could you do this? You're the worst person ever. I'm gonna kill myself. You start throwing out these fucking haymakers. What I think we see is a lot of times, like, either people stay because they feel guilty, or they don't want you to harm yourself, etc. But it's never gonna be a healthy dynamic, right? Because like once, especially we hit that point to where like we know we're in a bad situation and we need to get out of it. Like you can't fix that, right? Like the only thing that can even have any kind of chance to fix that is fucking time and space. And it's that's basically when you hit that brick wall, and it's like either I've got to work on myself and have faith, or you got to be able to cut that tie and say like let the other person do whatever they got to do, and it's not my fault. We got to hit that point where we realize nobody owes anybody anything. Like in the grand scheme of things, we don't. Like we're all just here to have this fucking experience. It's gonna go however it's gonna go, but we can't live our lives, like basically just like indebted to and like trying to make our decisions based on other people, right?
Yeah. Look at something you said there in regards to the whole suicide. Um, so I'm still a little conflicted about actually sharing the story, but I'll see how I go. So when it comes to this, what we're discussing here in regards to suicide being a means of manipulation, something that I went through a little while ago was relationship, and like I've mentioned a few times, I end up interacting with some crazy people, and that's something that I've been working on myself because realistically, it's me who allows these things to happen. Like when I get in relationships with people, this is something that's, and it's not like I'm going like, oh well, I've got to look for someone who's a little bit on the crazy side, and I want to get together with them. But it's just something that for some reason I gravitated to, and I think it was more from the sense of, like it was someone who said that they wanted help, and I wanted to help. I think that's probably the perspective that I was coming from in these kind of situations. But anyway, so this particular example, I ended up being with this person for about 9 years, 10 years, give or take. And the thing started off like I should probably looking back, and I probably should have done, but hindsight 2020, right? So about 3 months into the relationship, there was some cheating involved and that kind of thing. Nothing too hardcore, but essentially, like when we confronted the situation, I was just like, dude, look, doing that's how it is. It was kind of like, well, I want to change that thing. It's not who I am. And I believed them, because call me naive, believed them. But it continued happening, and again, going back to what I was saying, like way at the start, we do what works, right? This is what people do. So when we were getting into the arguments about, this cheating situation, that kind of thing, when it came up more times, essentially she started hurting us, and she had a bit of a history of it beforehand, but of it. And obviously, like I said, I was trying to help in the situation, so I gave her a lot of leeway, and I was like, "Hey, well, we need to work through this together, and I love you, you love me," kind of. From there, it kind of like increased. There was other things that were going on as well, not just the infidelity. And it got to a point where I was just like, "Look, I can't keep doing it. Right? There's been too many situations to work through. I've had enough, kind of thing." And this is where the whole suicide thing came. She'd been hurting herself for quite a few years, probably about 3 or 4 years by that point. And she was like, "Well, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself, and it's going to be your fault." And no. And she'd hurt herself multiple times in the past. We had to go to the hospital and that kind of thing. And she'd let the people, because when you go to a emergency, hospital, they kind of like they see a man and a woman come in, and they're like, "Oh, domestic violence," straight away, and they split them up. Fortunately, I had some friends with me that were there at the time that could verify what was going on, but she was willing to let them believe. She wasn't saying no when they were saying like, "Did he do this to you?" So she was what she was saying in the suicide thing was that she was willing to make people think that I was doing stuff to her and that kind of stuff to cause this, right? So there's a lot of manipulation going through here with the whole suicide thing, the threat of suicide if I left her. And it even got to a point where, not that I'm proud to say it, but she was basically demanding sex from me and said that she would commit suicide if I didn't give it to her, kind of thing. And eventually what I ended up doing is just pulling back, and she ended up finding someone else and leaving me for someone else. But the whole time I was scared of being the one to blame for her doing this. Realistically, she didn't have the intent. She was never going to do it. But because she knew that she could get me to do what she wanted me to do with these threats, she continued to persist and utilize it as a means to get what she wanted. And I don't want to say that she was a bad person, devil, and that kind of thing. Like it wasn't a nice thing to go through. But I do think that this is something that she learned through actually going through a process and going, okay, well, I've done this before. I've threatened to hurt myself and it worked. And as the stakes got higher and higher over time, the more comfortable this person was with our interaction, the more that she was willing to raise the stakes, if you will, to make sure that she achieved the goals that she wanted, which, she didn't want me to leave her. She wanted, particular things from me. And that's what she'd do. And it took, for me, like I said, I just pulled back until essentially she was kind of like demanding these things. And I did kind of wake up to it at some point and just said, well, I'm just removing myself from the whole thing. And I just kind of like went numb inside, dead inside. And she got bored, right? And eventually she moved on. A little sort of like, not that it's funny, but the person that she moved on to ended up contacting me a few years later and saying like, dude, this chick's doing this crazy shit, like, who is she, kind of stuff. And I've just like stayed completely away from it. But what it does reflect is that it wasn't something that it wasn't me personally. It's just something that she did. So from me, the next person that she moved on to, she was doing the same thing. And I think the next person beyond that, the same thing. She had a child with one of them. Thing. But this is kind of like a reflection of the extent that these things can go to. If they're left unchecked, if the people involved aren't willing to put their foot down and just go like, well, no, and just let go, if you will, of the situation. And because, like I said, like realistically, for people at this end of the scale, it's not that they're actually suicidal. It's not that they're going to do that kind of thing. It's that they're just trying to achieve a goal, which is to get what they want, to make things happen the way that they want. Unfortunately for me, I was young, I was naive, and I didn't see it coming until too late. I guess a decade later, kind of wake up to it. But this is what can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important takeaway here is to understand like so much of this is just about control, right? And it's not until we can understand that and like fully grasp it that we can start to realize like how deeply these things go, right? And because I guess you could say like I was probably more on the other side, probably like closer to like her side than you were. So one thing that I could tell you, I don't know if it'll make you feel any better, but it sounds like you've kind of like already grasped this, is that like you're not necessarily always aware of the things you're doing, right? And this is kind of like what I was stressing earlier. Like until you're aware of the things that you're doing and like you fully grasp it, you can't really stop it. But like I can tell you, the way I became aware of it is like seeing it in other people, and then it took a lot of fucking self-reflection and really like dissecting my own habits and realizing one thing I've learned is very much that we are mirrors, right? Like whenever we're seeing things in other people, especially like people that we're closely, intertwined with, they are reflections of things in ourselves, to the point with me, like I could tell you, I could see shit that I don't even know if it was there, but I could totally see it in myself when getting into the introspective part of it. And yeah, man, it's not until you can really become aware of it and really like commit to changing any of this stuff that something different will happen. And it's not like it's all fucking rainbows and butterflies as soon as you like magically start dissecting this stuff and be like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like it doesn't fix everything, right? This ties back into the nobody owes anybody anything. Just because like I took some time, like worked through my shit, it doesn't mean that anybody's like coming back into my life, you know, like it doesn't mean like anybody owes me like another fucking chance or anything like this. You gotta make this decision to do it for yourself, right? Like if you're gonna do it for anybody, it's for yourself just as much. Because we can't, again, live our lives for other people. Like, if I convince myself that I've got to change in all of these ways, etc., and I'm doing this all specifically for one person, then what happens when that one person never comes back? Would I just revert back to the same bullshit that I was doing? Well, it doesn't really solve anything, right? Like, that just gets me another fucking lesson from the universe and some more misery coming my way. But yeah, it's like whenever you start out on it, obviously, like, we all have our own fucking path we've got to go. And I mean, I can tell you, I 100% started off with the mindset that I was going to like make these changes and fix all this shit for another person. Like at some point along the way, I'm really grateful that I was able to see that, you know, if I'm going to do anything for anyone else, I better be willing to do it for myself. Because at the end of the day, nobody owes us anything. There are no guarantees. It doesn't matter, you know, like how hard I try or anything like that. It doesn't mean it's going to fix anything. So once I could get past that, it was able to, you know, help me keep going deeper and deeper. And I was starting to, you know, get into the more complex issues because obviously this isn't complex enough, but you know, like the things like fear of abandonment, fear of the unknown, just being able to completely like face yourself and not be afraid to be alone with yourself for extended periods of time, you know, like all these things, it all has to kind of start somewhere. And all I can tell you is like it very much started when I became aware of the fact that I was, you know, sometimes at least the bad guy in these situations, right? Like it's not always the other person's fault. Like sometimes you just have to be able to look at the shit that you're doing and be like, fuck, like I'm not proud of this. And, you know, like I'm not going to keep doing this because it's not right. It's not fair to other people. And it's, even if it temporarily gets me what I think I want, it doesn't get me what I want in the long run, right? So being able to just break through all this bullshit and then at some point finally getting to the point where I can just be, you know, myself and not feel like I have to like adapt or change for other people and, you know, like finding some kind of way to have faith in anything because until you can find something to have faith in, be that, you know, yourself, God, the universe, love, anything, like you have to be able to have some kind of faith in something to even make any of this worth it. But yeah, I mean, I think on some level, and maybe this could tie in with what I was wanting to get into with the episode of The Good Place is, you know, until you can find some kind of faith in any of this, like it's ultimately just pointless, right?
Yeah. Expand. Continue expanding.
Well, okay, so, you know, just to segue into something hopefully like a little less dark, even though, depending on your perspective, you know, I guess we could just call this like the meaning of life, right? Like what's it all about? Yeah, obviously we all have to kind of figure this one out for ourselves because I can't tell you it's going to be the same for everybody. But in this week's episode of The Good Place, they get to the good place, right? And you know, they're like, wow, it's all fucking rainbows and butterflies and magical unicorn farts. You know, you can do anything you want whenever you want. It's all fucking perfect, etc. And what they find out is it sucks. You know, it's kind of like. I know it's hard for people to like wrap their mind around this, right? Like, well, if everything's perfect, I have everything I could ever want, and I can do anything I want at any time. Like, how could that be bad, right? And you know, I was also talking to somebody about the idea of utopias this week, and you know, their argument was like, well, if everything's perfect, then you know nothing needs to change. And I'm like, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And they're like, well, no, like if it's all perfect, then how do we know? I mean, and then of course they pointed out the fact that there's never been like a pure perfect utopia, so it's all speculation. But to kind of like tie into something we've talked about a few times in the past too, it's about the contrast, right? Like you don't know good without bad, you don't know life without death, etc. Like you have to have that contrast. That's the whole meaning of duality. Is you need the opposite side of the coin, because if you only have everything one way at all times, it's just pure monotony. Like it's gonna be just as torturous and boring in the long run, because you have no flavor to it. It's all just perfect, right? And so we kind of like, towards the end of the show, they get into the idea of, well, how do we fix this, right? Like if the quote unquote good place isn't perfect, how do we fix it? And one of the first things they like kind of come to is, well, without the option of death, right? Like without the option of things, coming to some kind of logical conclusion, it makes it feel almost like a prison, because you can't get out of it, you can't stop it, you can't change anything, right? Like you don't have an option. And that's basically what they come to, is like death really does have a purpose, and I can tell you just from like watching this show, they don't get as deeply into all of this stuff, but like the symbolism and the themes are there. Like if you're into this kind of stuff, you'll see it. And then they started talking about, how to approach this. Like one, they implemented that people could choose to no longer exist if they wanted to, which I mean, that could be suicide, death, however you want to look at it. But also, they kind of started, I guess you could say, like examining that idea that like perfect isn't perfect. And I'm kind of like gonna take this theme that they were kind of playing at to the conclusion that I've come to in my own life. And that's the idea of, like whenever we die, like whenever it's over, the only thing to do is do it again, right? Like, energy doesn't end, and in my perspective, consciousness is energy, right? So, kind of like if we can look at these things and realize like there's no perfect, like there's no paradise where nothing bad ever happens, and we can like break this stuff down, whether you believe in death is death and nothing happens after that, or whether you believe in the old man in the sky, or whatever you believe. Like you gotta obviously figure out what to have faith in for yourself, and how to make some kind of sense out of this, or else obviously life's just kind of a burst of random insanity that happened for no reason, and it's gonna end at some point. But yeah, man, like, and I think this kind of like ties into something Watts was pretty famous for talking about, and that's like his view of existence isn't that different from mine, but basically it's like whenever we die, we're reborn, we live another life, etc. But I think about it like this. Well, let's say that whatever like the perfect paradise place exists, if you can have any experience you want, and you can do anything you want, I gotta think on some level what we're doing right now, like this life, exactly where we're at, no matter what the bullshit we have to deal with, like all the fucking complications and the insanity that we think happens, and like all the ways we suffer. I think if we can at some point accept that like maybe like we chose this, like this is the fucking game that we slotted into the cassette, whatever, for this life. This is the story we decided to read. I don't know, however you want to view it. I think if we can get to that point where we think like, okay, well, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and the only thing to do is to have this experience and enjoy it to the best of my ability. Accept it for what it is and just appreciate it for being something, right? Whenever we can get to there, like the whole meaning of life problem, the existential crisis, at least in my opinion, it kind of goes away.
Yeah, I think that I've got to advocate for being on the fence, right? Because we talked about life being perfect and needing the contrast of imperfectness to appreciate the perfectness. We need that conflict. So it's about balance, and I think when we're talking about being like the meaning of life, what it comes down to is being happy. Now, what makes a person happy? And I know that last week we were talking about, is happy really a thing? Like, if you want to replace that word with, content or anything else, but like you want to be at a zone where like things are cool. It's like cool, bro. If you don't want to use happy, just think cool, bro. Right? But what makes us be in that realm of happiness or cool, bro, whatever you want to call it, is subjective, right? Some people like the rain, some people don't like the rain. Some people, like to be in the big city. Some people like to be out in the country. It's a variable. It depends on the individual. And I think that's kind of like the meaning of life is more the fact of finding your happy place, right? Your zone, what makes you, where you're at, and don't worry about everyone else what they're doing, right? Find things that are congruent with who you are as an individual, right? Don't get into the whole, the martyr complex and like dying for your belief and having to put it in people's faces and show off to everyone. Like, forget it. Like, what is it that makes you you? What do you want? And gravitate towards that. And that, for me, that means being adaptable to our surroundings, seeing what's going on, and making the shifts necessary. Like, as we become more aware of the self, because when we have life experience, we find that we like things, we don't like things. I like to go for my avocados because y'all know I ain't a big fan of avocados. I try eating them because it's supposed to be good for you, that kind of thing. I've tried them a few times, not a big fan, but like I can say, okay, I've tried avocados. They're on a scale of 1 to 10, right? I've graded them and I'm like, okay, well, this is my level of avocado. So I'm not going to go live in an avocado plantation, avocados all day, because I don't like avocados, right? It doesn't make me happy or cool, bro, as we like to say. So finding that balance comes to being like adaptable. And I'm going to chuck in a little Bruce Lee into the chat space there. Where our superpower, I believe, as human beings is adaptability. That's what makes us be at the air quotes top of the food chain. But recognizing that can be difficult, for us through the trees and everything, through social conditioning, societal constructs, government systems, and that thing. So I think our purpose here is to sift through what's available to us and create our universe around us. That's best reflective of what it is that we enjoy doing. We like interacting with, we like being around. And we were talking about particular people and some of the shit that we do to each other, which is pretty horrible. Being able to recognize these things and going, okay, well, I don't like these kinds of people that are doing these kinds of things. Doesn't mean that they're bad. I mean, there's, like I said, the whole open relationship and that kind of thing. That's for some people. If it's not for you, that's fine. You don't have to go around, picketing and holding up signs saying, these people are terrible and they should all go to hell and, that kind of thing. Cool. Let them do their thing. It's just not for you. Find the things that are cool for you. Gravitate towards that. Make your own good place as much as you can in the life that we're living here and now. And just appreciate it for what it is. I think that it is an experience for us to have, and it's open-ended. It's like if we're going into the gaming side of things, it's an open world environment, and it's up to us how we choose to interact with it.
Yeah, and I would say, I think one of the important things here too is to realize that we have to manage our own expectations, and in my opinion, it definitely makes things a lot smoother to let go of my assumptions, right? And I'm not saying you can't ever have expectations or assumptions. Obviously, we're human. It's part of the experience, the human condition. But whenever we have expectations and we try to push those on other people, right? Basically, we're not having a real experience here, right? Because we're trying to conform people to our own ideas, beliefs, and we're trying to make them into something, right? Instead of just appreciating them for who they are. I don't want to throw Azaria under the bus here, right? But so earlier, Shane decided he was going to go to watch wrestling, and I was messing with him like, "Oh man, you didn't make Azaria go out there, right?" and I mean, I think to me, like this is a perfect example, right? Like, okay, so he enjoys something. And I think a lot of us would probably like some people would probably think it's completely cool, right? Like personally, I don't think I'd want to go watch wrestling live. But I could totally appreciate, he was like, no, like he went by himself, right? Because like if you can not try to like force your expectations onto another person, and you can both just appreciate each other for who you are, then it's a lot smoother process, right? Just like Ron, right? Like if Ron expected every woman that he ever interacts with to like put on clown makeup, like sure he might find some that are into it or some that'll do it, but you know, yeah, I guess she is Ron because anytime you start talking about Azaria and she doesn't respond, but yeah, I mean, like basically that's my point here, right? It's like we gotta appreciate people for who they are. And if they appreciate us for who we are, then that's great. We don't need to force people to do anything or like want to do anything. Like just appreciate people for who they are, and hopefully find people that mutually appreciate you like you appreciate them. And I think it makes for a lot smoother experience, right? But whenever we start having expectations, like where, well, I like to do X, and like if you're my friend, you're my partner, like whatever it is, then obviously you have to like this, or you have to, come accompany with me, etc. It's not really fair, right? Just like let's say you got a friend that likes to do something that you don't want to do, like that ideally they shouldn't be trying to like push you into coming to it with them. Like if you were dating somebody that just eats avocados all day, Cope, and they keep trying to they keep trying to shove avocados down your throat. Like there's probably gonna be some animosity get built up, right? Like it doesn't matter how much they like avocados and how fucking perfect and wonderful they think they are. They either one, they're just gonna still do their thing and accept you for who you are, and you can accept them, or they're gonna try to like force the avocados on you, and you know what? Maybe you'll put up with it every now and then, be like, okay, here I'll eat an avocado, but like unless there's like that mutual level of respect and appreciation for each other's individuality, it's kind of like creates this imbalance where you're constantly trying to like conform each other to your own ideas, right?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like something that's a takeaway from this as well. Is like if we continue to interact with this, it can have very detrimental impacts on who we are as individuals, right? Because, dialing back to what I was saying before in regards to that relationship, like I chose to be there, right? I told you 3 months into it, there was signs of this shit. And I was like, no, true love and blah, 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 all that kind of shit. I chose to interact. So if we start seeing things that don't align with who we are, right? Don't fool yourself. Don't trick yourself, right? It's a lesson, right? And I think for my example, is I went through that for X amount of time, and it was just as much my fault as it was anyone else's. But I needed to take a lesson, and I refused to take that lesson for X amount of time. Now, if I'd have just taken that lesson on board and just moved forward, and gone, okay, well, look, this is who they are as an individual. That's what they're going to do. It's not congruent with who I am. Just leave it alone. I could have saved myself a lot of heartache, turmoil, and a whole bunch of other crap, right? But I chose to keep going. So if we're the ones who are choosing how long we interact with these things, if we can acknowledge the things that we're doing and apply interventions to the self, not to other people, right? Whether they like eating avocados or not, and they're trying to force. Like if someone's trying to force you to eat something you don't want to eat, go, okay, well, maybe this isn't cool. Maybe this isn't working out. I'm going to sit here and keep going out there with this person. Why? Because they're hot, right? Because they got money, because they got status or anything else. Like, dude, you're just torturing yourself, right? But we need to interact with these things until we realize what's going on. And if we can take that, the sooner we take that lesson and move on with it, the better it is for us, because we won't be, for the lack of better wording, torturing us for X amount of time until we learn that lesson. And if we can do that, the sooner we'll get to, the space, the good place that we are we should be creating for ourselves in the life that we have while we're living it here.
Yeah, I think something that we should probably touch on here is like, as a society, I'm not saying everyone here, but like there's definitely a large portion of our society that kind of, I guess it would be fair to say, like romanticizes or like idealizes the Joker Harley Quinn relationship dynamic, right? And
Yeah.
like I can see like the appeal of the idea, at least, that somebody will do anything for you. If push comes to shove, they always have your back. They'll if they had to, they'd kill somebody for you or whatever. I mean, like I get that, like on some idealized level, that seems like the ultimate. I guess you could say like level of commitment. Or maybe commitment would be the best word here. But like actually examining this and like looking, kind of like at the psychological codependent nature of a relationship like that, right? I think like what happens is people kind of like lose their own self identity into each other, right? And they both kind of like start creating these idealized versions of each other in their head. And ultimately, instead of being two people that are, like mutually appreciating each other, etc., what happens is you get into these, emotionally manipulative, guilt riddled relationships that just aren't healthy, and hopefully they don't all lead to like psychotic fucking killing sprees, but I mean, there's plenty of other ways that they can be unhealthy and unbalanced. But I mean, like understanding that like this romanticized like kind of quote unquote fantasy relationship just isn't real, and that whenever it does get real, you're looking at somebody that is basically suffering from extreme Stockholm syndrome, somebody that is constantly being like emotionally manipulated and ultimately like groomed into like adapting who they are for this other person. And even if the other person's not, like I said, like a complete psychopathic fucking homicidal villain archetype, it's not healthy and balanced, right? Like you shouldn't have to lose your identity into another person to have a relationship.
Yeah, it kind of like reminds me of a line from Offspring's song "Self Esteem," where it says, "The more you suffer, the more it shows you really care." Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's something that's reflective in society. The way that we frame love and frame relationships is based in this bullshit realm of this sacrifice and hurting yourself and doing damage to yourself to show other people that you really care about them. Another fantastic example of that I like to go to is The Notebook. It's a crazy ass movie. People are kind of, oh, that's so romantic. And dude, the dude was willing to sort of like put him, like he was hanging off a Ferris wheel, saying he was going to let go if the girl didn't go out with him. And she was actually out with another guy, right? She was out with a boyfriend at the time, and he's like, if you don't go out with me, I'm going to kill myself. And basically forced this girl to go out with him. Yeah, this whole story, right, while it's framed as something romantic, is horrific, right, for somebody to go through. But it's the way that it's framed and the way that it's put out there. Oh, it's a beautiful love story. It's not. It's not. So when we experience these things in our own real life, we look at these things and go like, oh, well, if somebody is willing to kill themselves for me, it must mean that they really love me. Or it can also be a reflection of the fact that if you really like somebody and they don't like you back, what you should do is threaten to throw yourself off a Ferris wheel, and then we'll go out with you because that shows that you really care. And that's just not the way that it is, right? We are sort of like promoting unhealthy relationships, and then we are wondering why things are horrible. in relationships. And when we just even look at the statistics of marriages and that kind of thing, like 50% of them don't work, just period, right? And then after a certain amount of time, it's like 50% of those ones end in divorce anyway, right? So like it's like with these kind of numbers, we should be kind of like waking up to ourselves and seeing things for what they are. But unfortunately, because the romanticized version of what love, air quotes, truly is, um, makes us not see things clearly when we're in love ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a problem, right? Like when our society like romanticizes these, extreme ideals, and I think the problem is like we get bombarded with them from such a young age. That we don't realize like this is for entertainment value, right? Like these things are like played up and taken to extremes for, like some kind of like emotional impact in a movie or, entertainment value, I guess. But yeah, like I don't. I mean, I can't personally imagine, like any kind of healthy relationship forming from trauma bonding. Like I'm gonna kidnap you from this mental institution where you were my nurse, and we're gonna fall madly in love and go on killing sprees together because you're the only one that matters to me. And it's just like, yeesh, But I mean, like Disney does it too. I mean, a lot of fairy tales, they're played up to these like crazy extremes of just unrealistic expectations for one, right? But also, I feel like it also kind of like puts into place, definitely like some assumptions, like you said, with if I get like the positive reinforcement from threatening to kill myself, well then I should assume going forward that this is like my best tactic. Like it's how I maintain the control in the relationship. Sorry, I get the hiccups now. But yeah, I mean, dude, personally, I mean, I feel like the only really balanced thing to do is to be comfortable with yourself. Have like a firm self identity, and kind of, for lack of a better word here, like let nature take its course, let the universe, connect you with the right people, etc., and find people that you can mutually appreciate each other, right? Like,
Mm.
it's
I think part of that is being able to stand your ground as well, because society does kind of like to bop you on the head if you're air quotes different, and that can be a battle in itself.
yeah, that's definitely fair. I mean, I think that kind of like ties in with the expectations though, because like if we think that like this is what is supposed to happen, like if we're supposed to be these, like extremely I don't know, like I guess you could say like grandiose characters instead of just being ourselves. Yeah, it definitely creates unhealthy like I don't know if I'm gonna say like self image here, but definitely like unhealthy ideals, right? Like kind of like what you were talking about earlier to kind of tie this in a little bit. Like it's very much popularized in Western culture that we have to like rescue women, right? And like I'm not saying there ain't women out there that try to rescue men, because I've seen plenty of that too. But like this idea that like you have to save somebody, right? Like, dude, like save your fucking self. Let them save themselves, and then if it all works out, cool. You can both be perfectly saved individuals that appreciate each other and have a wonderful life. But yeah, man, like we're not meant to suffer and try to, like I guess you could say like conform and like live our life as like some kind of like servitude to fixing somebody. If somebody needs fixing, the only person that's going to fix them is themselves if they choose to do it. It's like this idea that we have to, like lock onto somebody and like full commit to making their life perfect. It's like, well, what about your own life? So we've got to realize that fixing our own shit first and then approaching a relationship, at least in my opinion, is the healthy and balanced way to do it. I mean, I can't tell you that people shouldn't like the fucking head games and all that bullshit. I mean, I'm sure there are people that at least think they enjoy these things, but yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my takeaway on it, right? It's like, fix your own shit and don't try to save people. Save yourself.
Yeah, I think that part of the probably for lack of better wording, the belly up technique, where you present yourself as someone who's in need of assistance, in need of help, and that kind of thing, is also a tactic utilized by individuals as well to, again, just as much as the whole suicide thing. I think that belly up kind of like, I need help and I've been through so much terrible stuff and, help me kind of thing, is also a tactic that's utilized. And like you said, with the whole like women do it too as well. It's like, how many times have you seen this play out, right? Where it's kind of like, oh, she's going to change a bad boy into a good boy. She's going to lock him down. It's like, dude, he's a bad boy, right? He's doing bad things, whether it's, drugs, whether it's robberies, whether it's, whatever it is that you see as a bad thing. You see them being the type of person that you don't want to interact with, but they kind of like, it gives them the edge. Oh, I need to change them, kind of thing. It's the same dynamic, right? And until we recognize that in ourselves, like, how are we like really seeing things turn out any different? Because as far as I've seen, each of these stories tends to work out the same. Is like the person goes in to try and, air quotes, help said other person. The bad person in the situation, that's air quotes, destroys the air quotes good person. And did we really think it was going to turn out any other way? I don't know. I just don't see how we can see it any other different way than what it is. Shit, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It definitely comes down to managing your own expectations and assumptions, right? Because if we're expecting that this is how relationships work, and we're I guess you could say, like, assuming the other person either one wants to change or needs to change, like, it's just like you're already starting from a place where you don't completely accept the other person. And I feel like if you're gonna spend your life with someone, like a life partner, husband, wife, whatever we want to call it here, yeah, I mean, that's got to come from some kind of place of accepting the other person for who they are, right? And I mean, I think if you can do that, then it's fair to expect that they do the same for you. And in fact, like, I would say it's fair to demand that they do the same for you. Because if you can fully accept somebody else for all of their faults and all of their, positive aspects, then it's only fair that they do that for you, right? Like, I guess that's yeah. I mean, I guess you could say that's another whole relationship dynamic that we could get into. But yeah, I mean, there are totally, like, some heavily narcissistic individuals out there that believe that they're like fucking God's gift to, the opposite sex, and like everything's fucking rainbows and butterflies and unicorn farts for them. And then, like, they're doing you some kind of service by allowing you to be in a relationship with them, and like, you should be thanking them. You should be their slave, basically. But yeah, again, this goes back to we cannot live our life for another person. The only person we can live our life for is ourselves. And yeah, I mean, we all have to kind of figure this stuff out for ourselves. And again, I can't tell other people what they should and shouldn't want out of relationships. But from my experience, this is what I've found, at least.
Yeah, and I think something to add to this as well is particularly if somebody comes with a whole, belly up technique. If somebody else wants to change, what the fuck's that got to do with you, bro? Right? Like, you don't have to get involved. Okay, if they want to change, okay, you leave them to their devices. If they change, fantastic. It's got nothing to do with you. And you trying to influence that change is only going to make them resent you and cause more problems and that kind of thing. So, I guess it's kind of like, well, you kind of like exist in each other's realm, if you will. But it doesn't mean that you have to try and make them change, force them to change, help them change. None of that. They want to change, they're going to do it on their own. It's got nothing to do with you, and vice versa. And if it's congruent with the direction that you're moving in, the path you're walking down, Izzy, if you are indeed here, then that's great. And if not, then recognize it and move the hell on, or else it's going to hurt you in the end, right?
Yep. Well, Cope, it definitely looks like Julia desperately needs your attention.
I did do a little jinx with Peachy because we did say the Copacabana a minute ago, so I was unjinxing, but apparently it's offensive to unjinx someone. Maybe you just don't want to talk. How dare you, good sir? I am offended. Get woke.
Azaria is here, Cope. Look, Azaria is here. Azaria, we need to borrow you for a moment, Azaria. Please come and join us in the philosophy hole.
Zara's going to get drugged.
Yeah, it's very important. We must ask you a question that relates to what we've been talking about tonight.
We hope you've been taking notes. All right, there will be homework. This is it.
She's over there right now, like, oh shit, they're gonna know I wasn't listening the whole time.
Hey, Izzy.
The philosophy hole.
Yeah. So Azaria, I kind of like mentioned earlier, but we're talking about like the idea of like accepting each other, right? Like the healthy relationship balance, etc. Like not trying to conform the other person. And I brought up the example of Shane going to wrestling tonight, and like I was making a joke with him about dragging you there, right? Now, obviously you didn't go, right?
And I'm very grateful and thankful that he does not make me go do things like that. Just as he is very grateful and thankful that I don't drag him places like going to the mall to buy clothes. So yeah.
Wait, you go to the mall?
Okay. Bad example. I used to love going to the mall to buy clothes. I found it very soothing. But that was when I had money, or AKA credit cards. And now, yeah, I don't have that anymore. So I don't go to the mall anymore. But yeah, I mean, I don't watch wrestling. I don't care that he watches wrestling, but he just bought those tickets and he went. He didn't even ask me if I wanted to go because he knows I don't want to go.
See, and I think this is like a really good example of what we were talking about with like a healthy relationship dynamic here, right? Like you're not trying to conform the other person. You're not trying to like guilt them into doing things that like you may want to do that they don't want to do. I mean, like I think like this, to me at least, this is an example of accepting each other for who you are and not trying to like force your autonomy on the other person. So yeah, it just happened to be that incident earlier really tied into what we were talking about. So I wanted to get your perspective and make sure I wasn't just assuming.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's a good point. I've been in relationships before where, when I was younger, it seems to me like a lot of the crap like that happens when you're younger, when you're trying to find yourself, when you kind of get lost, and you lose yourself in someone else, and where situations where someone will get mad because you weren't going to do the thing that they wanted to do, and or like would get mad if you wanted to just go to maybe a work party by yourself because you didn't want to deal, to get like the jealousies and stuff like that, all that crap. I think that's like a young person issue, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, and yeah. Like I said, it kind of like tied into what we were talking about, and I mean, I figured this would also probably give Cope a good chance to say buzzwords. Go ahead, Cope, say the buzzwords.
What buzzwords?
Well, wait. Okay, here's the thing. I just want to say that about the mall. Okay, because I see people are talking about the mall. Yeah, I think when I go to the mall now, it does give me a little bit of anxiety. It is a lot, and I don't like all people. But when I said that it soothed me because I used to have. I know my cat, my cat Snippy is meowing because I'm talking right now. So he thinks I'm talking. um, I had a shopping addiction, so it soothed me that I was able to soothe my addiction, but I no longer have that addiction, so I don't go to the mall anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's see this is a great example right here, Cove. You know what we were talking about, like becoming aware of our own shit and working it out, right? Like I don't know. I can tell you, I definitely used to have a problem where I would like I've never been like one of those people that just like loves to go shopping, but like I would love to waste money on other people. Like I was like that guy that would like give people like the crazy like inappropriate gifts for like no real reason other than it made me feel better about myself. And yeah, I mean I think like learning these things and like getting past them is you know definitely like a building your self-esteem and your self-worth kind of thing. And I mean, I can't tell you why, you know, you like to go shopping all the time, but I mean, I can just, like, looking at my life, I know that's what was going on. And, yeah, I mean, I think it's great, you know, like, getting past something like that. And, yeah, I mean, I think that was also a really good example earlier with the whole, you know, Shane going to the wrestling thing and not, like, trying to force you to go with him. Because I think we can see, like, lots of relationships, you know, they're like, oh my god, I want to go to the Beyonce concert. Like, why aren't you coming with me?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because and this is not the first time this has happened. There's, like there'll be concerts like Wilco, and hey, he'll be nice. He'll be like, "So the Wilco's coming, and I'm gonna go," and he'll just kind of like look at me, and I'll be like, "Awesome, have fun." Like, and he knows I don't want to go with him. Um, but yeah, that shopping addiction, that was like trying to fill a hole that I felt inside of me, and that when I would buy all those clothes, it filled that hole, uh, while I was doing the shopping, but then as soon as I got home, um, it was like I just had that same empty feeling, and then I would just return all the clothes.
Time to go back to the mall.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, no, and I mean, so, like, I've tried to explain this to before to people that, like, whenever I talk about drug addiction, right, it's really hard to describe to somebody that isn't going through it. But like, what I find is it's very easy to relate it to other things that people do. Now, I don't know if it's like part of the human condition, you know, that we're just we're all like on some level addicted to some things, but yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely like healthy ways to, you know, like have these kind of like hobbies and these activities that we do, and then there's also, you know, like the extremely like unhealthy ways. And yeah, I mean, like yours may have been shopping, you know, like mine was I need to not be myself right now, so I'm gonna go do anything I can to escape from that. And you know, like for me, it just happened to be like hard drugs. But yeah, I mean, you can do like people do that with sex, people do that with you know gambling, people do that with spending money. Uh, yeah, it's definitely an interesting way that like we can have like such different quote unquote addictions, but like I think on some level they're very much about the same thing, you know, and it's
I think when these things become like a vice, that's when we sort of like start having those issues with it. And yeah, like you said, it can be anything. Yeah, you're talking about sex, you're talking about that, but even like video games, even yeah, just like eating, anything can become a vice if we sort of like interact with it enough. And acknowledging that can be difficult when, again, being forest through the trees situation. When we're in it, we deny it from ourselves, like we're in denial.
oh god, I just figured it out. Azaria's moved on to cats. Cats are her new addiction.
You don't even know. There's another cat now outside
Oh
that
my
is
god.
trying. I know it's out of control.
Azaria, you definitely have an abundance of cattage.
too.
But yeah, so I know you don't like to just jump on air forever. I mean, you can stay on if you want to. Just letting you know, like I'm not like trying to push you into staying on or anything. I really did want to hit on that topic though, since I kind of like brought it up and dumped some of your personal life on there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a perfect example. Thank you. So, yeah, I'll go back into the audience, and if I feel like I need to have Snibby say something, then I'll jump back.
Yeah, yeah. Tell Snibby we appreciate jumping on the show with us tonight.
He
We
has
we expect meows at the end of the show for the crazy noises.
Yeah, so yeah, that was good. I'm glad I read that right and I wasn't just like assuming. But yeah. No, I mean I think that's a good example of what we were talking about there, right? Like to have, like a healthy, like actual like functional balanced relationship where you're not just constantly trying to, like vie for assertion of autonomy onto the other person and see who wins the struggle, like where you're quote unquote like losing yourself in each other because you're both more worried about the other person than yourselves. I mean, I think it's good, right? Like we have to be able to know what we want, what we like, etc., and accept the other person for who they are, and just be okay that sometimes these things don't 100% overlap. They're not meant to be. We're all unique individual people. And even if we share, tons of things in common, we're very compatible people, it doesn't mean it has to be 100% thing. Like, we should still have some kind of self identity that doesn't overlap with the other person. We've got to still be ourselves.
Yeah, it's a complex thing, the whole love situation. And as I've said before, and we've mentioned multiple times, I think if we can just acknowledge that people are different and we will have different perspectives of what love is and that kind of thing, if we can just accept that and just be understanding of it. And understanding not just being like, okay, well, yeah, I get it kind of thing, but understanding to the point where we can go, okay, well, there is enough flags, maybe is probably not the best way to put it, but enough flags in the situation, the relationship, for me to go like, yeah, okay, this isn't for me, to acknowledge that and not just continue pushing forward, trying to make things work that clearly are not going to work because the longer that you leave it, the more that you push through these things, the worse the break is going to be at the end. And I'm not talking about like the breakup, but I'm talking about like the psychological like turmoil that you go through, the aftermath, well, can be something that can impact you for years after, because you've essentially put yourself through something horrible. And being able to understand that and acknowledge it and just go, okay, well, I can understand that, I can respect it, and it's just cool. We'll just like part ways right now, make it nice and easy, and not making it any harder than what it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think life itself is already complicated and hard enough without trying to manage two of them at one time. And I think that's really where these problems come in, right? Like whenever we're so focused on another person, we obviously aren't putting that attention on ourselves. And while it's completely fine to, invest a lot of time and energy on another person, to be heavily focused on another person, call it love, call it a career, like whatever it is that you're putting all of your time and energy into, there definitely has to be that level of balance where we're still taking care of ourselves, right? And I can tell you right now, it's something that I'm really trying to kind of like find my own groove on because, for the last 3+ years, I was very much in a really good groove. For the most part, I enjoyed how I was living my life, doing my own thing. I didn't have to answer to anybody. And I'm now at a point where I'm spending 40+ hours every week devoted to some company for money. And, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but I mean, it definitely has some good aspects to it. Like, I'm actually managed to make a actual real life friend, believe it or not. All of my friends are internet people or imaginary people that live in upside down land like Cope. But yeah, I mean, like it's you got to take the good with the bad, right? You know, got to appreciate the contrast. And ultimately, you know, I did choose to do this thing. It's not perfect. Maybe I'd rather be doing other things, but you know, if it gets me to where I need to go, then you know, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, for shiz. And I think that kind of like brings back something we were talking about a little bit earlier with the whole martyr complex. Um, because something that you were explaining there of you get yourself in a good place, you're doing things decently, you feel you're going okay, and for a brief moment in time or however long it is, you put your focus somewhere else, and you can find yourself trying to help somebody out of a hole. But the way that you do that is by jumping into the hole, helping them out, and then you're stuck in the hole, right? So we've got to be aware of that as well. There should be a line to how far we're willing to go without hitting that whole martyr complex, because it can, destroy you, and it can also destroy your relationship.
Yeah, and look, guys. Okay, so yes, maybe I did just call you all internet people, but here's the thing: like, it doesn't always have like I've met Azaria. Let's see. Okay, so nobody else here tonight I've met, but yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. I think like at some point we gotta realize that there's, at least in my opinion, there's a major difference between like actual face to face interaction with another human being than there is just typing and maybe like occasionally having like a voice conversation online. It's just not the same thing, right? And to kind of like tie back into something what we were talking about earlier, this is something I've had to learn, and I no longer try to get into romantic relationships online. And I think the problem is we form ideas of who we think people are, and online it's extremely easy to create these like idealized versions of other people, you know, and think that like everything's, you know, one way, or you know that we have like the whole picture. But the thing is, you know, whenever we're online, even if we're not necessarily intending to, we're still putting out there a representation of ourselves that is not the real thing, right? Like, I try to be as authentic as I can with all of my interactions with all of you. But at the end of the day, it's still not me that you're like personally interacting with, and you know, it's an online persona. I mean, like it, you can't put your whole person onto the internet, no matter how hard you try. And I mean, hey, look, I've seen some websites out there where people put all of themselves online 24 hours a day. But even then, I still feel like unless you're having like actual face-to-face, you know, interaction and communication with another person, yeah, there's still just like a lot to be desired there. And even then, you know, like that's one of the things that I've also had to come to terms with too. Like even in face-to-face communication with another person for extended periods of time, it doesn't mean you 100% know the other person. Like, we gotta realize that we're all still individuals, right? Like, we're all unique. You can't ever like 100% give or show yourself to another person. Like, no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't work like that. You know, some of this like has to kind of get into like, you know, faith, and also accepting the fact that we're all constantly changing and evolving individuals. But yeah, I don't know. Personal opinion is I would much rather be hanging out with all of you guys, fucking just having a chat right now, than me talking to you over the internet. You know, and it is what it is. And I feel like it is powerful of a tool, and like how much this has allowed us to like connect with people all over the world. I still feel like it becomes like almost like a crutch, you know, because it's not real face to face interaction. It totally allows people to, you know, like hide parts of themselves, and I don't know. I'm not trying to like say people are here doing this or anything, but I mean, you got to realize that there's most people on the internet are not just being 100% authentic at all times, right? I mean, what do you think, Coop?
Well, I think that even just the perspective that the how we express ourselves is like a representation of the self, it's not who we truly are. And until we have that the interaction for X amount of time, we've seen each other interact in a number of different ways. We don't really know who we really are, and even at that level, we don't really know each other. Just we know each other better. But going to something you were saying there in regards to like the whole internet interaction. When it comes to the interaction between people, the words that we use are only about, I think, 7% or 8% of communication. There's so much communication that happens beyond the word. I mean, there's also the tones that we use, the inflection, that kind of thing. But there's body language, there's micro expressions, there's facial expressions, there's all these different things that go into communication that can tell you more about who a person is. So definitely, I'm on the same frequency there, where it comes down to it's very limited the interaction that we can have through the interwebs interaction. So yeah, I'm with you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something to really stress here too, right? Like, so much of actual communication is nonverbal. Like there's the words we say, obviously. Even if you're like doing voice communication, you can usually pick up more from like the way people are talking, their tone of voice, etc. Um, to me, text, like just having like a text conversation online would probably be the worst way to accurately convey your thoughts, emotions, and opinions to another person. The best that I've found is obviously face to face. Voice, like having like a voice chat, a phone call, or something like that, it's usually a lot better than just trying to do text. But man, that's one thing that like I remember whenever I was growing up and everybody started getting cell phones, and when I got to the age that all of my friends just wanted to text, I was like, damn, like something's missing from this. Like I totally I'm not saying like I got it all at the time, but like I totally knew something felt off with texting, right? Over time, like I've kind of come to the conclusion that you're missing so much from even just like tone of voice and inflection, but even whenever you're like face to face interacting with someone, there's body language, there's so much more that kind of goes into it, and yeah, so sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings with calling you internet people, but I mean, it is what it is, right? Like until like we ever have like a face-to-face conversation, I mean, I don't think you get the full picture of who I am either, right? And so, like I said, that's one of the reasons why I've pretty much committed to the idea of I don't want to ever try doing the whole internet dating thing again, right? Like I've already tried that a couple of times. It never ends well. And I think so much of that is like you just can't have effective communication online. I mean, maybe if you already know the person, like you're already like intimately familiar, maybe it can carry on pretty well just through like voice or text, but as far as like just meeting people that you've never met in your life, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like you'd know a very limited slice of other people, if that makes sense. So I still love all of you, but yeah, I've never seen an alien in real life, so I don't know if Peachy's real. I I don't know. I was about to say something that was probably extremely not good, but I've never seen Swoop in real life. So, yeah. But I mean, for the record, I would love to hang out with all of you guys. Yeah. So, yeah, if anybody ever wants to come down and cruise this way, we can have fun. Or maybe whenever I get some freedom, I'll be able to cruise the U.S. and hang out with you guys. Maybe one day I'll even crawl over to the Upside Down world and visit Cope.
Well, you have to get a pass from Rondon to make sure you can cross into the virtual reality realm, since it's all made up by NASA and doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and I mean, plus, shit, I've got to get like one of those flame retardant suits too, right?
Oh yeah, for shears. Need the virtual reality drive and the suit, flame suit.
Yeah, I just imagine all of you guys are like walking around in like full on fireman suits with like the masks and everything at all times.
Well, it's not that bad, but it's getting pretty close.
Yeah, I don't
We're just
know.
waiting for locusts at the moment. I think that's pretty much where we're at. You know, just waiting for the locusts, and then we can confirm. You know, it's turning into hell.
Dude, I mean, I feel like at some point, like it's got to stop, right? Like, I mean, hopefully that point isn't like once everything on the fucking continent is ash, but I mean, like, I feel like at some point this fucking fire has to burn itself out, right?
We'll run out of fuel eventually.
It's fucking crazy, dude. Just living in goddamn Inferno land down there. I mean, I thought Waterworld looked crazy, Kevin Costner doing this thing, but fuck, man, you Aussies sure know how to take shit to extremes. That's all I'm saying.
Fireworld, baby, Fireworld.
Damn, dude. I bet you could probably get Mario and Luigi to come hang out down there.
I'm pretty sure there'll be plenty of people comfortable down under, right, with all the flames going. It's all right.
Yeah, I think Chu's finally back on this side of the world, so I was hoping maybe we could get her back on again before she left the motherland, but I guess at least she got out safely, and hopefully the rest of you guys can stay safe. That reminds me, I got another friend out there in Kangaroo Land. I need to reach out to her and see if they're doing all right.
Well, whereabouts they at?
I want to say Sydney, if I remember correctly. I'm guessing Sydney's not on fire yet, right?
Oh, well, I'm part of like Western Sydney, so like we kind of like had fires about 20 minutes away from us. That was probably about as close as they got. But as long as they're in the Sydney area, like the metro area, it's a lot harder for things to catch on fire. As soon as they get more towards the semi-rural area, which is kind of like where I'm at, they're at a higher risk. But like I said, like the towns and buildings and that kind of stuff, they're a bit safer. But if you've got like houses amongst forest and bush, well, they're in a lot of hurt right now.
Yeah. Well, here we are on the ass end of yet another everybody dropping butt pic show, and I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if Azaria is going to actually be able to put Snibby on air for the weird noises. I mean, I feel like it would probably be complicated, but that would be hilarious. So maybe one day.
Pretty simple. Sounds like a pretty simple process, right? Because the equation is if Izzy's talking, Snibs is meowing, right? So all we have to do is get Izzy online with Snibs. Izzy talks, Snibs meows, we make noises, job done.
You know what we need? We need cat headsets. That's what we need. We need like actual like little gamer cat headsets, and we can put them on all of Azaria's cats. and then we could have like a whole Azaria's Cats Weird Noises episode.
Only if we throw GoPros on them as well so we can see what they're seeing.
Oh yeah, fuck it. You gotta have the whole experience.
Immersive.
But yeah, much love, Shamalama Ding Dongs, and pack of weenies from the servo.
Yeah, Dingo Babies, the place is on fire. Much love, copious hugs in all your directions. And I will catch you next time, I guess.
Woo woo. Chick, chick. Woo woo.
Boom. 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 Tick, tick, bro.